You're listening to Mentoring Developers. Have you ever thought about this dirty word? It's called self-promotion. It's actually two words. Self-promotion. People, there are certain segments that believe that's something that you should never ever think about. Right? Promoting yourself, letting people know that you're good, that you're available, that you have these skills by all these different avenues, which is one is to put your work out, you could write about it, you can talk about it, you could give conference talks. Essentially, it's all self-promotion, letting people know you are somebody that they should pay attention to. Versus, the other approach is, let the your work speak for itself. So you just put your head down, do your work, and if anybody's interested, they will talk to you. If otherwise, it's not your concern. So those are two different positions. What do you guys think about this?
I think there's a very huge misconception. So there's this misconception that talking about yourself is bad, or the whole idea of okay, let me backtrack a little bit. So I have noticed a lot in software development firms and companies and various places that they value humility. Humility is like a huge thing that people value in employees. They want that. And in some sense, I think there's a misunderstanding of what humility means, because a lot of the times when I hear the word humility, I end up seeing people take that as never taking or not taking credit for the work that they do, or not being oh, I actually am a really good developer. It's a lot of oh, I'm not that good. Oh, I'm not a great developer. There's so much I still have to learn. Yes, I've been doing development for 10 years, but I'm still not good. And that's I have an issue with that, because I'm just you should be able to, yes, let your work speak for yourself, but be able to take ownership of your own work and be yes, I built this thing and I've made a lot of progress over my years of development. I'm not there yet, but I have, made all this progress so far. And I don't think there's an issue in that at all. And I think that if anything, our industry, self-promotion is not seen as bad, because it's not seen as self-promotion. It's seen as something let me share my work with you and show you what I'm doing. And instead of kind of hiding away in my corner and building stuff, it's I'm open sourcing the work that I do, and I want to talk about the technologies and the discoveries that I found in my exploration of this technology or that technology, or working on this problem.
I absolutely agree with Divya, for sure. I think that there's no shame in taking pride in the work that you do and wanting to share it with people. I think there's a line that it could cross to where it gets, people can get a little cocky about it, but being excited about the things that you do and create, there's nothing wrong with that.
I know, Divya, you've made a presentation that I saw on YouTube. Very nice, by the way. Have you made any other presentations?
I've done lightning talks about various things, technologies that I'm learning and concepts that I picked up. Yeah.
Was that at local conferences in Dayton?
They're just the Dayton web developer meetups.
And how was that experience?
It's good, because I think it allows me to kind of take a step back and analyze my process. And one of the lightning talks I gave was about writing better code and my process for how I was being very conscientious about how I wrote my code. And in some sense, it allowed me to analyze my own process and be able to explain to somebody what I was, what my exploration was and what my findings were, and my process overall. So in some sense, it helps because, take for example, and it's not necessarily in presentation, but in the way that I write code, I document my functions, I document the code that I write, and the modules like JavaScript modules or whatever that I write. And in some sense, I have to take a step back and be able to write things in a cogent enough way so that the next person who has no understanding of what I had written can read that and understand things. And I think that's a really valuable skill in our industry, because in some sense, yes, we want to write code for things to work, but ultimately there's a lot of technical debt that comes with the code that we write. We're not going to be the only one. There's a high likelihood that we're not going to be the only one who's going to be touching that code base. There's going to be multiple other developers after us who we might not even meet, who will be writing code or adding code to it. And so being able to articulate your thought process or articulate your findings and what you're trying to convey is really useful in our industry.
I think that this is a really good approach. And there's a feeling that when you write code in a modern programming language, you're not writing for the computer, you're writing for a human. So for somebody to understand your intent. And later on, you can do a transformation on that and make it more efficient. But that will be a secondary concern. The primary concern is when I look at the code, it's like I'm reading a book. Do I know what you are trying to achieve? And if I know what you're trying to achieve, and if there is a technical defect, let's say that is a bug, you implement. This connection interruption is sponsored by the Internet Service Providers of America. Proudly destroying podcasts one connection at a time. I don't know who's the culprit this time.
Oh, goodness.
Well, let's start again. So, what I want to say is that if you're writing code and I'm reading it and I know the intent and I know what you're trying to do here, and in a code review, or perhaps you're looking over your own code later on, 6 months, 2 months, 3 months later, and there is a bug. There's a serious problem in the code. But when you're looking at it, it's obvious, it's clear what your intention was. And if that's the case, then it's very easy for me to redo that code and perhaps find a technical problem and solve it. But I should never have to question the intention. I should never have to say, I have no idea what you're trying to do here, what I was trying to do 6 months earlier. We have all seen code. I have certainly had my share of looking at code that it's impossible to tell what the objective. And that's where naming comes in, variable naming, naming. And there's all of these patterns that we have discovered, and that we like to use. They are all, and really a lot of the testing that we do, the test-driven development, it's really to bring out the intent. It's really, really good to know that you've learned it pretty quickly.
For show notes and transcripts, visit us at mentoringdevelopers.com.